Hey there viewers, and welcome back. Today we're going to take a look at a rear drum-in hat brake job on a 2016 Chevrolet Suburban. So let's go ahead and hop in. Nope. Yup. Second try. We're working on a JD9 RPO code for the brakes. There are two different styles of brakes for this vehicle, and they will have different specifications, both torque and for their performance, of course. We're going to use a 19 mil socket. And if the socket gets stuck, just wiggle it, thread it on a little bit, wiggle it, and out the lug nut will come. Set that on the running board so we don't lose it. Ooh, we don't want the wheel falling off. Fish that lug nut out of there. Okay, we got it. Perfect. So my first step on this is going to be, we're going to loosen the caliper to knuckle bolt, I guess we'll call it. And considering that's on there at 170 foot-pounds, make sure our ratchet's going the correct way. It is. We're going to use a lovely piece of pipe on the end of this ratchet, and we'll see if we can break it. Oh, that was too easy. Pardon my head in your way. This one is really up there. They almost don't want me working on it. Okay, just make sure you're on the bolt all the way when you start horsing on them like this. Seriously. Last thing I want to do on a Friday night is have to go to GM and buy bolts. Believe we've got it. Yep. Okay. Perfect. So these are turning. We're going to need to put a backup wrench on them. The caliper to knuckle or caliper to bracket bolts are turning. So I'm going to go ahead and find an open-end wrench that actually fits on that so we can keep them immobilized. Okay, we're going to use a 13/16. It doesn't really fit right, but we don't have to put a lot of torque on it to keep those little bolts from turning. So it'll be fine. It's fine. It's fine. Okay, we're not going to take that out all the way. I'm going to do this one up here on the top. I'm going to need an extension. And that wants to turn too. So I'm actually pretty impressed on this. This has a 4-link rear end in it, which is, you know, I don't see a lot of those, especially in the older vehicles. You really don't see those. That's definitely got to improve the ride comfort and such on it. Which means there's 4, links that hold the rear end into the truck. There's 4 control arms, so that's good. Okay, so we've got everything loosened up. I'm going to drop the caliper first, lose my extension. They obviously put Loctite on these back ones, or they're just rusty. Either way, we will put thread locker on them to make them difficult for the next guy. Yep, looks like there's a thread locker on those fasteners. Okay, beautiful. Okay, at this point we should be able to peel the caliper. Pull on it a little bit. Okay, and it is a single piston. Interesting, very interesting. And the piston is metal. Also very interesting. So we'll just hang that up so that it's not in our way. Actually, we probably don't even need the hook. We'll probably just set it on the link. I think that's exactly what we're gonna do. Make sure we're not kinking that brake hose. We're not. That's good. Looking at our pads, bring you in a little closer. Our pads are thinner than the material that they're bonded to. These are a bonded pad, of course. And so it's definitely time to replace those. I can see that they both are wearing evenly. There's no taper. They both look good. They're not worn down to the metal or anything like that, so it shouldn't have any caliper pin problems. Both of these are actually moving quite nicely. And I'm looking for a wear indicator, and I don't see one at this point in time. So let's go ahead and finish pulling these bolts out of the back. These have the Loctite on them, so you're not going to be able to spin them out with your fingers, unfortunately. There's one. And then we can peel our caliper bracket. So where we're at now is I'm ready to pull the rotor, and I just want to point out that the parking brake drags ever so slightly, and that's exactly where you want to set it. So this is a drum and hat, meaning there's actually a drum brake inside of the hat. You have to use your imagination to pretend that this looks like a top hat. But when we remove the rotor, you can actually see that drum brake. And on that drum brake, right up here is the adjuster for it. So we're not going to do anything with it. I'm not going to adjust the adjuster. But when we put the new rotor on, we have to make sure that parking brake drags just that ever so slight little tiny touch. Otherwise, the brake pedal will engage way too close to the floor and the parking brake won't hold the vehicle. So we have to be mindful on that. Let's go ahead and clean up this hub face. We're going to use 3M's little tool here. Same thing we did up in the front. That does a really nice job. And again, we have to do this to make sure that the rotor actually sits flush up against the hub face, or in this case, it's the axle flange. We're also going to look behind and see, ooh, we got a little tiny bit of weepage on an axle seal. It's not real bad, but nonetheless it's there. That's interesting. I'm going to use an air tool for this. I think it'll be faster. We're just going to get in here with some 80 grit and knock that kind of high spot of rust down between each one of these lug studs where I can't get with power tools. Get everything nice and cleaned up. Okay. Next, we'll give it a rinse. Oh, that already looks really good. Then we'll let that dry. Now that it's dried, we're going to apply a generous amount of fluid film, and this will help keep this rust from happening again. You can put Crown on it or whatever you want to use as well. Just try not to spray these parking brake shoes full. You notice I didn't go at an angle like this because I really don't want to get this stuff on those parking brake shoes. So we want to make sure that the wear indicator on the new pads faces the back here. Hopefully you can see that, and just keep that in mind. There is a wear indicator on these pads. We're going to go ahead and remove the old pads. Hopefully they come out without too much fuss. Okay. Get behind the abutment hardware with a screwdriver. Wiggle that out. You're probably going to destroy it when you take it out. Then I like to take a file. You can really only use the tip, and these are not that bad. As you see, I grind that paint off. That actually cleans up really nice. Get in there, we'll scrape that out good. Do the same with the back. It's a little rusty. Probably could use a bigger file, not. I don't have a great assortment of files around here, unfortunately. Okay, and we'll do the exact same thing to the other side. Okay, beautiful. Next, we're going to put some Permatex brake caliper grease. It's a special grease. It's good up to 600 degrees Fahrenheit. We're going to put this on the caliper bracket, both sides, and that's to prevent this rust from reoccurring and jamming up the hardware against the pads, which will actually cause the brakes to drag and the pads to seize up. So we don't want to have that happen. It will also help cut down on noise and squealing and those types of things. The next thing we're going to do is pull out these caliper pins, and you can see they are well greased. So I'm not going to put any additional grease on them. I'm just going to put a tiny little bit up here on the top to help keep the water out. And then you can see we got positive air pressure, so we're going to squeeze and we're going to burp. Sometimes it's a little bit of a challenge. We can burp that air out just like we did there. Spin it around a little bit, get a good seal. Everything's clean and ready to go. That's working beautifully. We'll do the same thing with the other one. Okay, that one's well greased as well. Just put a little bit, not too much. If you put too much grease, these things will actually kind of pressure their way out, cause the pads to drag. So you really don't want to do that. Okay, that's very nice right there. Our next step is going to be to install the abutment hardware. Oops, I've kind of put that one on backwards. It pretty much self-centers. This doesn't click like the front abutment hardware does. We're not going to put any grease on the pad side of the abutment hardware. Okay. Next, we're going to install the pads. Please, 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 please make sure the friction material is actually facing the rotor. Okay, I've seen pictures on the internet where people will put these pads in backwards with the friction material facing the caliper. And then, well, yeah, it ends up here in this shop. So anyway, we're going to go ahead and drop another pad in. They kind of lock into the abutment hardware. There's a little tab that kind of holds that back, sort of. It doesn't do a very good job on it. It's just basically to keep it from falling out while you're working on it. I think I'm going to bend this tab out just a little bit. That way it hooks that. It looks like that one's done enough, so we're good to go. Okay, this caliper is clean, prepped, ready to be reinstalled on the vehicle later. So this rotor is encased in plastic, which is kind of interesting. There's an oil, you can see it on these rotors. So you need to take some brake clean and go around their perimeter and wipe that stuff off. Don't just put this rotor on the car raw because you'll contaminate your new pads. So you can see that stuff coming off. We'll do both sides. Okay, very nice. We're also going to get inside of here for the parking brake. I don't spend too much time on that. Nobody except me uses the parking brake. I'm just going to take a piece of 80 grit sandpaper, get this little bit of rust off this piston face. Make sure you do this before you press the piston in so you don't sand this seal here down. I'm just going to pull that seal back and snap it a little bit, and that way it doesn't get stuck full of air when we compress the piston back in. So just be mindful of that. We're going to get these sides of the caliper, or the claw, just scuffed up good with 80, get any contaminants, any junk like that out of there, and then we'll put a little bit of Permatex on them. What we're going to do now is we're going to use the double donger tool in the single donger. So they actually make two versions of this tool, but we're going to push that piston back in. I seem to be pinching the arm there. Okay, so you can see how that's working. Pushing that in. Everything's going in nice. Go tell it don't go no more. And you can take it out. Let that rest, and then come back for the stealth attack with the Permatex. And this just keeps the squeaks down. It keeps the rust from happening. We're going to put a little bit on the back sides here of this claw, if you want to call it that. Doesn't really matter. Okay, that's going to keep everybody quiet. Hopefully that stays put. Next, we're going to clean these bolts, get all the thread locker off of them, instead of being a hack and just putting more on. So now we're going to put the rotor on. Find the hole. Found the hole. And it drags ever so slightly. So I am not going to adjust the parking brake. If you had to adjust the parking brake, you would just rotate that little wheel that I showed you earlier with a screwdriver. Some rotors actually have a window in them for you to do that on, like the Enclaves and the GMC Terrains and stuff like that. So, okay, we're good. The rotor is installed. Next, we'll bring up our loaded caliper bracket. Get a bolt ready to go. Get another bolt ready to go. Run these down by hand. There's really no room to get impact tools or anything on these, unfortunately. Okay, next we'll torque them. Next we're going to sneak in and administer 148 foot-pounds of torque. Okay. We'll bring our dainty little caliper up. I'm going to have to pinch the pads in to get it to fit. Okay, that in, slide it on. If your pads don't fit into that abutment hardware, buy different pads. Don't grind the pad, little ears down or anything on those pads. So hopefully you can see what we're doing here. That's all threading in super snazzy. Don't tighten anything down until you get everybody centered up. Okay, now we'll torque it. And the torque spec for the caliper to bracket is 38 foot-pounds. You can actually see we already got that on that one. And we got that on this one. Very nice. That's perfectly normal. It has just a little bit of slide to it. The pins are working, nothing's bound up. There's no kinks in our brake line, anything like that. All the abutment hardware is installed. We are ready for the wheel. Don't forget, before that wheel goes on, I always like to put just a little bit of anti-seize grease on these threads. Keeps everybody from rusting up. I'm going to put some fluid film on the back of the wheel, just on this area here. Don't coat the whole inside of it, but just on this area here so it doesn't weld onto the brake rotor when you try to rotate the tires next time. This spacer goes on with the flange facing the rotor. That is exclusively for an aftermarket wheel. Okay. Now we finger start the lug nuts. We're going to tighten the lug nuts to 140, but I'm going to do it in a multi-step process where I tighten them down just a little bit at a time. Okay. And we'll put the center cap on. I did put a little bit of blue Loctite on the bolts for the center cap so I don't have to tighten them down extremely tight, and they also don't vibrate loose. It's just something that I do, so I don't want them to lose the center cap. Again, when these wheels get to be a couple of years old, it seems they discontinue them and you can't even get a center cap. So there you go. Well, there you got it, folks. That is how you do a rear disc brake job on your 2016 Chevy Suburban LT. It is a drum and hat, as you saw, so we didn't have to adjust the parking brake, which was really nice there, but that's a pretty simple procedure if we actually needed to do that. So hopefully you enjoyed what we did here. Don't forget to pump up your brake pedal and double check your brake fluid reservoir. As always, thanks for watching and good luck with your brake job.